Good day and welcome to this exciting Life Sciences Grade 12 lesson. I am Tumi Silani, Life Science teacher from Milner High School in the Matlosana Sub-District here in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Today we will be looking into the human nervous system, specifically looking into the human ear. I would like to extend my welcome to everyone joining us today, especially our beautiful Grade 12 learners. Feel free to have a pen and pencil because this is going to be a 45-minute broadcast. The last 15 minutes will be designated to any questions that you may have. On today's lesson, we are going to be looking at the human nervous system, specifically the ear, and we will be describing and explaining the mechanisms that are involved in hearing and balance. Before we jump into the lesson, it is very much important for you to familiarize yourself with the topics that are going to be in both your paper 1 and paper 2 of your prelim and final exam. The distribution of marks per topic should also inform your prep time for the particular paper. For instance, human reproduction as well as the nervous system, as we can see over there, constitutes a majority of the marks in your paper 1. Therefore, the greater the mark allocation, the more prep time you should be investing in that particular topic. You cannot be spending 2 to 3 weeks preparing reproduction in vertebrates, for example, whereas it's only going to constitute 8 marks. So like I said, the bigger the mark allocation, the more prep time you should be prioritizing for that particular topic. Another document that is actually very important are the examination guidelines. When you are preparing for your prelim and final exam, it is important for you to go over the exam guidelines because they compel the examiners on what content to examine. So they tell you exactly what the examiners are going to examine and what you should prepare for when you are preparing for both your paper 1 and paper 2. So do not do any preparation without getting a direct instruction from the exam guidelines on what you should be preparing. Okay, I hope we are ready and we are excited because we are moving right along into the lesson. So let's look into the ear. There are 2 processes that are associated with the human ear. The first is the mechanism of hearing. The second is the mechanism associated with balance. Let's start with hearing. All right, now these are the typical structures of the human ear. In pink, we have the pinna, the auditory canal, and the tympanum or the tympanic membrane. In yellow, we have the middle ear, which are the 3 ossicle bones, the eustachian tube, as well as the oval window. In blue, we have structures of the inner ear, which are the semicircular canals, the snail shell shaped cochlea, as well as the auditory nerve. Now, here we must be able to describe the adaptations of parts of the ear in facilitation of hearing. So here we are talking about the pathway of sound. Now, each structure of the ear, structure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, are specialized in that they do specific things in order to facilitate in the overall function, which is hearing. Let's start with the first one, the pinna. What does the pinna do? The pinna traps sound waves and transmit these sound waves to the tympanum or tympanic membrane through the auditory canal. The auditory canal itself transmits sound waves to the tympanum. And what does the tympanum do? The tympanum, when it is hit by sound waves, it will start to vibrate to amplify sound. And then the vibrations are going to be taken to the middle ear. Listen to the terminology. Pinna traps sound waves from the external environment, transfers it to the tympanum through the auditory canal. What? Sound waves. When the sound waves hit the tympanum vibrates, and the vibrations are taken into the middle ear. What do we find in the middle ear? We find the 3 ossicle bones. What are they called? The ossicle bones are known as, the first one is the hammer, second one anvil, and lastly we have the stirrup. To make it easier for you to remember what they are and the sequence in which they appear in the middle ear, we can abbreviate it as HAS. Guys, HAS is not an official abbreviation. It is just to make it easier for you to remember what the 3 ossicle bones are and the sequence in which they appear. So, the ossicles also vibrate to amplify sound and also cause the oval window to vibrate. Causes the oval window to vibrate. The oval window also vibrates to create pressure waves in the cochlea, in the fluid in the cochlea. There's a fluid in the cochlea called the endolymph. So, the pressure waves from the vibrations of the oval window causes movement in the liquid that is in the cochlea, and the liquid in the cochlea moves because of these vibrations. Let's have a visual very quickly. Please note what happens when the sound waves hit the tympanum. What does it do? Starts to vibrate. When it vibrates, it causes the 3 ossicle bones to also vibrate and the oval window to also vibrate. Why do they vibrate together? They are connected to one another. So when one vibrates, the tympanum, it causes the ossicles to vibrate and the round window to also vibrate. What does the cochlea do? The cochlea contains the organ of Corti, which is stimulated by the pressure waves of the oval window and converts the stimulus into an impulse. Then the impulse is sent to the cerebrum of the ear via the auditory nerve. So the auditory nerve transmits the nerve impulses to the cerebrum of the brain for interpretation. Now, let's look at this. Outer ear, from the pinna, auditory canal, tympanic membrane, sound waves travels in the outer ear. Then it hits the tympanum. Then the tympanum vibrates. The vibrations are taken to the ossicles, which also vibrates. The oval window also vibrates. And then the vibrations from the oval window causes movement in the fluid of the cochlea due to the vibrations of the oval window. And then in the cochlea, we find the organ of Corti, which receives the stimulus and converts it into a nerve impulse. Outer ear, sound waves. Middle ear, vibrations. Inner ear, pressure waves. And beyond the inner ear, nerve impulses. Now, let's look at the functions of the round window as well as the eustachian tube. There is the round window over there. Remember, the oval window is supposed to be somewhere there, and then there is the round window. What does the round window do? The round window absorbs excess pressure waves from the inner ear to stop vibrations from being echoed, because we don't want to hear this and this and this and this and this. So that's exactly what we are avoiding. Remember, when the oval window vibrates, it causes pressure waves in the cochlea, in the inner ear. So the excess or extra pressure waves will be absorbed by the round window to prevent the echoing of sound. The eustachian tube, which is the tube over there, it connects the middle ear to our throat. And what does it do? So the eustachian tube drains excess, remember the word excess means extra, fluid from the middle ear, thereby equalizing pressure on both sides of the tympanum. Where is the tympanum? There is the tympanum over there. So when it drains excess fluid, it equalizes pressure on both sides of the tympanum, meaning equalizes pressure in the inner ear, in the middle ear and the outer ear. With that being said, question time. So, the diagram below represents the human ear. Very important. Examiners will never include these unlabeled parts without asking them, without examining them either directly or indirectly. So you are supposed to study the diagram first, and then after that, then we look at the questions. How do you study the diagram? On your question paper, label them down because they will either be asked directly or indirectly. So, structure labeled A, that is the pinna. Structure labeled B, over there, that is the tympanum on tympanic membrane. And be very careful with structure C. Remember, in the middle ear, we have 3 ossicle bones: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. We said we use the abbreviation HAS, H, A, and S. Hammer, anvil, stirrup. And remember, it also shows the sequence in which they appear. Now, the first one there is not given a letter. That is the hammer. The third one there is not given a letter. That is the stirrup. But the second one there has been allocated a letter. Therefore, it is the anvil. D, we have a semicircular structure. Therefore, that will be the semicircular what? Semicircular canals. And then we have E, which is also easy to identify because of its snail shell shape. That is the cochlea. The eustachian tube over there. And then lastly, there we have the auditory nerve. Now, let's look at the questions. Question 1.1.1, give the letter and name of the part that. Letter and name for 2 marks, meaning you are going to get 1 mark for the letter and 1 mark for the name individually. Guys, please read the instructions of the question very carefully, and also look at the mark allocation because it informs the depth to which you are supposed to answer your question. So give the letter and name of the part that, sub-question A, transmits impulses to the brain. The correct answer there will be F for 1 mark, the letter, and auditory nerve for another mark, the name. Allows pressure waves to equalize between the outer ear and middle ear. Pressure waves to equalize between the outer ear and the middle ear. The correct answer there will be G letter and eustachian tube name. Sub-question D, pressure wave in a liquid. Pressure wave in a liquid. That would be E, the cochlea, releases pressure from the inner ear, releases pressure from the inner ear. From the inner ear, guys, not the middle ear, the inner ear. And the correct answer will be that, which is H, round window. Question 1.1.2, give only the letter of 2 structures in the diagram of the ear that when damaged would result in the following. When damaged would result in the following. When sound vibrations cannot be conducted through the outer and middle ear. Let me just clean up my diagram. Alright, let's read the question again. When sound, give only the letter of the two structures in the diagram of the ear that when damaged would result in the following. When sound vibrations cannot be conducted through the outer and middle ear. The correct answer there will be B and C from the diagram, because they conduct sound vibrations to the inner ear. Sound waves in the inner ear are not converted into an impulse. Remember, the organ of Corti is found in the cochlea. It receives the pressure waves for sound and converts that into an impulse. So the first answer definitely is E. And what transmits the sound, the sound wave, the impulses to the cerebrum of the brain, it will be part F, which is the auditory nerve. 1.1.3. Okay, we have not looked into the defects yet. We'll come back to this question later on. Now, the second mechanism associated with the ear is balance. The inner ear is involved with balance. The inner ear is involved with balance. Yes. However, this part over here, which is the cochlea, is part of the inner ear, yes, but it is not associated with balance. Rather, it contains the organ of Corti, which receive a stimulus for sound and is converting it to an impulse. So the inner ear, with the exception of the cochlea, is responsible with balance. Now, which parts of the inner ear are associated with balance? That would be firstly the semicircular canals. At the base of the semicircular canals, we have these structures that look like they are quite inflamed. Or inflamed, is inflamed the correct term? They look like they are, they are bigger. Alright? They look like little balls of something at the base of the semicircular canals. What are those structures called? They are called the ampullae. They are known as the ampullae, and we find them at the base of the semicircular canals. What do they have? They have receptors that are called the cristae, and these are stimulated by the stimulus, which is the change in direction and speed of the body, and they create an impulse from that stimulus. Then we have the sulcus and utriculus, which both contain the receptors that are called maculae. They are stimulated by the stimulus, which is the change in position of the head in response to gravity. Now, this sounds like a lot to be able to take in, but I am here to make everything easy for you to memorize and understand. Right, balance. In terms of balance, there are two ways in which the inner ear regulates balance. So the inner ear, firstly, stimulus. The first stimulus is the change in direction and speed of movement. So let's say, for example, you are dancing. When you are dancing, you are changing the direction of your body, and also you are dancing at different speeds. So that is our first stimulus. And then the receptor that receives the stimulus would be the cristae, and then the site where those receptors are situated is the ampullae at the base of the semicircular canals. And then to make it quite easy for you, let us use the abbreviation ACIDS for you to be able to describe this. Okay, so we are going to be working in reverse order, meaning from the site of the receptor all the way to the stimulus. Let's see. ACIDS. A, C, I does not stand for anything. It is just included for the sake of completeness. Then D, then S. Okay? So, in the ampullae, A, we find cresti, C, which are stimulated by the change in direction, D, and speed of movement, S, acids. Let's try that again. In the ampullae, A, we find cresti, C, which are stimulated by the change in direction, D, and speed of movement, S. The second way in which the ear regulates balance is through the stimulus, which is the change in position of the head. When you change the position of your head, that is a change in response to gravity. The receptors are the maculae, which are found where? In the sulcus and atriculus. Now, to make this easy, we use the abbreviation SUMP. Again, we are working in reverse order from the site in which we find the receptor to the stimulus. SUMP. The sulcus, S, and atriculus, U, have or contain the maculae, M, that are stimulated by the change in position of the head, P. The sulcus, excuse me for a moment. The sulcus and atriculus contain the maculae, which are stimulated by a change in position of the head. When both these receptors are stimulated, what do? Both receptors converts the stimulus into an impulse for an additional mark and sends it via the auditory nerve, additional mark, to the cerebellum. The word bellum sounds like balance. Bellum, balance. Which sends the impulse to the affected muscles to maintain balance. There we go. This question will often be asked for a single stimulus for about 8 marks, like we are going to see in our set of questions. Guys, let's look at some questions. Okay, you can either be asked to describe how the human ear contributes to maintaining balance, or they can ask the question like this: explain how the human ear is adapted. Guys, how the human ear is adapted. The question of adaptability, you've been asked, I believe, from grade 10, from structures, okay, to maintain balance. Again, when they ask you about adaptability, the question is actually asking, of all the parts or all the organs or all the structures, what is so special about that particular structure to perform a specific function. So to answer the question about adaptability or suitability or specialization, it is asking what is so special in the features of that particular structure that allow that structure to be able to perform its function or the overall function. So all you have to do, if they ask you about the parts of the ear that are adapted or suited or specialized for balance, all you have to do is mention a structure that is associated with balance and what for 1 mark. After mentioning the structure, then you mention the function of that particular structure for an additional mark. So when you say that for example, that the ampullae, 1 mark, contain the cristae, 1 mark, which are stimulated by the change in direction and speed of movement. And then what do? They convert the stimulus into an impulse. Okay? When you're asked about, say, for example, the sperm, just making an isolated example, how is the sperm adapted to its function? Remember, your job is to mention the structure, a structure in the sperm and its function. For example, when you say that the sperm has a tail structure, 1 mark, which allows for locomotion or swimming movement, 1 mark. Okay, so structure and function. So in this case, they might ask, explain how the human ear is adapted, or they can say suited, or they can say specialized to maintain balance. Structure, function. Or this question can be, you can be given a scenario where you would have to analyze the scenario, determine the stimulus. Is the stimulus the change in position of the head, or is the stimulus the change in direction and speed of movement? If the stimulus is the change in direction and speed of movement, then we use acids. The ampullae contain the cristae, which are stimulated by the change in direction and speed of movement. Then what happens to that stimulus? Then it is converted into an impulse. The impulse is transmitted to the cerebellum via the auditory nerve. The cerebellum sends the impulse to the muscles to restore balance. If the stimulus is the change in position of the head, remember we use abbreviation SUMP, where we say the sulcus and the tracheus structure contain what? The maculae, which are stimulated by the change in position of the head. And what happens to that stimulus? The stimulus is converted into an impulse sent to the cerebellum via the auditory nerve. Then the cerebellum sends the impulses to the muscles to restore balance. Remember, if you are given a scenario, please analyze the scenario. If the change is the speed and direction of movement, then you use acids. If it relates to the change in position of the ear, then you use SUMP. Okay? Now, let's look at the questions. There, yes, we're supposed to be going there. Let's look at our set of questions. Again, we study the diagram first. So, structure B would be this structure that is semicircular. Semicircular what again? Semicircular canals. And then A, structure A, look at how it differs from this one. So this one is more round, this one is more oval, so this definitely is the round window. Then structure C is our auditory nerve, and structure D is one of our easier structures to be able to answer because of its snail shell shape. First question will be identify C, auditory nerve, D, cochlea. Name the receptors that are found in part B. The receptors that are found in part B is our semicircular canals, and we said at the base of the semicircular canals we find the ampullae. Remember our abbreviation, acids. So the ampullae contain the cresti. So the correct answer is cresti. Question 1.1.3. Describe how part B, the semicircular canals, play a role in maintaining balance when the body changes speed and direction. When the body changes speed and direction. Remember acids. A. Ampullae contain cresti, C, which are stimulated by a change in direction, D, and speed of movement. Do we get a mark for mentioning the stimulus? No, we do not get a mark. Why? Because it is stated there on the question. So we don't get a mark for that. And then what happens to this stimulus? The stimulus is converted into an impulse. The impulse is transmitted to the cerebellum via the auditory nerve. Then the cerebellum sends impulses to the muscles to restore balance. All right. Second question. A goalkeeper in a soccer match prevents a goal from being scored when he dived to his right after the ball was kicked towards him. Describe how he maintained his balance as he dived to save the ball. As he dived to save the ball. As he dived to save the ball. Now let's analyze the statement very carefully. When a person dives, they are moving from an upper position to a lower position. So what are they changing? They are changing their position of the head from standing upright to diving down. So the stimulus in this case is going to be the change in position of the head. So this is a scenario that is given. When you get a question like this, you must analyze the question very carefully. So for the change in position of the head, we use the abbreviation, remember, SUMP. Okay guys, I am not using a pen to write. I am using a mouse. So it is quite difficult to be able to write. So you are going to have to excuse my handwriting. So we use SUMP. This would be easier actually if I was using a pen. Now SUMP. The sulcus and atriculus contain the maculae, which are stimulated by the change in position of the head. Is that the correct answer? SUMP. The sulcus and atriculus contain maculae, which are stimulated by the change in position of the head. And what happens? The stimulus is converted into an impulse. The impulse is transmitted to the cerebellum, via the auditory nerve. Then the cerebellum sends impulses to the muscles to restore balance. Beautiful. We have answered all the questions. We have reached the end of our session. Now I can't wait to hear your questions so that we can discuss and respond to them. Thank you very much. Actually, that was not the last slide, you guys. We still have another set of questions. So let's just jump right into it. So here is our diagram. The diagram below represents a part of the human ear. Now, let us study the diagram very carefully. So A, we have a tube that's going down there, and that is the eustachian tube. And then B, let's look at B. We have a circular structure versus the one above it, which is more oval. So the circular one is known as the round window. And then C, we have in the middle ear 3 bones over there, and we know those are collectively known as the ossicles. And then we have D. Now, the semicircular structure there is the semicircular canal, and we said at the base of the semicircular canal over there is that structure which is known as the ampulla. All right, so we have all that we need. Yes, all letters are labeled. So of course the first question is identify part A. We've already said that is the eustachian tube. And then part B, we say that that is the round window. And then part E, we said is the cochlea. Right. Provide the collective name for the bones found at C. So we want the collective name of the bones found at C. State 2 functions of these bones. So this is a 2-part question. Firstly, we have to state the collective name, and in addition provide 2 functions. For how many marks? 3 marks, guys. Remember earlier I advised to you that you should please look into the mark allocation when you're answering questions. So collective name, that would be 1 mark, and 2 functions, that would be 2 marks, and together they are going to sum up to 3 marks. All right, so the collective name of the 3 bones are the ossicles. And what do? They vibrate to amplify sound, and then they also cause the oval window to also vibrate. Or you can say they pass the vibrations to the oval window. Then 3, the structure labeled D. Contains receptors. So, structure labeled D, we had earlier said that this is the ampulla. Sub-question A, name receptors found in this structure. So that is the ampulla. So which abbreviation has A in it? It is acids. All right, acids. So the ampullae contain the cristae, which do what? Which are stimulated by the change in direction and speed of movement. So the ampulla that we have identified as D contain the cristae. So the correct answer will be cristae. Then the following question, give the stimulus to which these receptors respond. So the stimulus, remember, acids, the ampullae contain the cristae, which are stimulated by the change in direction and the change in speed. So the stimulus is the change in direction and the change in speed. Is that correct? Yes. Change in direction, D. And the change in speed, which is S. Okay. So now we have officially reached the end of the presentation. I am excited to hear which questions you've noted with regards to the ear and the two functions that are associated with the ear. Thank you very much, guys, for your time, and let's hear your questions.